Story 1. The disappearing village of Lake Angikuni, Canada. I don't know how to begin this without sounding insane, but I have to tell someone, because what I saw, what I experienced up there, it doesn't feel like it should be possible. I've spent the past 2 years questioning my own memories, trying to convince myself it was a hallucination, a breakdown, something I dreamed up in the cold. But I remember every second too vividly, and I still have the scars to prove it. It started with an old article I found while researching for a piece I was writing on unsolved Arctic disappearances. I'm a journalist, or I used to be, before all this. The article was yellowed, brittle, folded in half inside a forgotten binder at a university archive. It told the story of Lake Angikuni in Nunavut, where in November 1930, an entire Inuit village vanished without a trace. A trapper named Joe LaBelle arrived, expecting to trade with the locals. Instead, he found every hut abandoned. Meals were half-cooked. Animal skins were still hanging out to dry. Sled dogs were found dead and frozen in the snow, still tied up. Even the village graves were unearthed, empty. According to the article, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police investigated but found no explanation, no signs of struggle, no blood, no bodies. They chalked it up to relocation, possibly starvation, but nothing about the scene made sense. The locals whispered about strange lights in the sky the night it happened, and after that, no one went near the lake again. It was like the place had been erased. The story gripped me in a way I can't explain. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started digging, old reports, survivor testimonies, anything I could find. Most of it was vague or conflicting. Some said the RCMP covered it up. Others blamed spirits or sky visitors. The more I read, the more I realized that no one had been back to that village since. Not really. At least no one who talked about it. I decided I had to see it for myself. I contacted a man named Utek, an Inuit guide who lived in Rankin Inlet. He was in his late 50s, and when I brought up Angikuni, his expression darkened. He didn't say anything for a long time, just stared at the fire burning in his wood stove. Then he said, "Some places are meant to be left alone." I offered him money, more than I could afford. He refused. I told him I'd go alone. After a long pause, he said, "If you hear singing at night, you cover your ears. You do not look out the window, and you do not speak their names." We left 3 days later, traveling by snowmobile across frozen tundra. The landscape was endless, white plains broken by sharp rocks, and dark, wind-worn trees, cold, like I'd never felt before, a kind of silence that seeps into your bones. It wasn't the kind of cold that bites. It presses, suffocates. On the 3rd day, we reached the southern shore of Lake Angikuni. The village was still there, tucked into the low hills and skeletal forest. But it was like stepping into a graveyard. The cabins were mostly intact, though weather-beaten. Doors creaked in the wind. Animal bones lay half-buried in snowdrifts. Everything was exactly where it had been left almost a century ago, like time had just stopped. I walked through the village with my camera, documenting everything. There were no signs of violence, no decay beyond what nature caused. A few wooden toys lay in the snow. A kettle, rusted through, still sat on a long, cold hearthstone. The cemetery lay at the edge of the trees. Every grave was open, empty. The soil, what little there was, had been scooped out by hand or claw. Utek wouldn't come past the tree line. He stood by the sleds, eyes scanning the horizon. When I called out to him, he just shook his head and said, "We shouldn't stay. I wanted one night just to record some audio, maybe catch the northern lights over the village. I pitched a tent inside the old council lodge, its roof partially caved in, but sturdy enough. I set up a fire in a metal drum, unrolled my sleeping bag, and tried to ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut. That night, I was woken by singing. It was soft at first, a low, breathy melody that rose and fell like waves. I thought maybe it was wind moving through the collapsed walls, but it got louder, clearer. It didn't sound like English. It didn't sound like Inuktitut either. It sounded old, sad, like mourning. I remembered what Utek said, "Cover your ears, don't look out the window," but curiosity got the better of me. I pulled back the edge of the tent and peered outside. The village was glowing, not brightly. A faint bluish shimmer covered everything, and figures moved between the cabins, tall, thin silhouettes gliding silently over the snow. They didn't walk. They just drifted. Some bent low like they were searching for something. Others stood completely still, faces lifted toward the sky. Their eyes glowed like embers. One of them turned toward me, and I swear, somehow, it smiled. Not with a mouth, with its whole face. I dropped the flap and scrambled backward into the tent, heart racing. The singing stopped. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, crunching the snow just outside. I held my breath, gripping the small knife I kept in my gear bag. The footsteps circled the tent once, twice, and then they were gone. I didn't sleep after that. When the sun rose, I found tracks around the tent, narrow, long impressions that didn't match any animal or any human. Utek was gone. His snowmobile was still there, his pack, but no sign of him. I searched the area, calling his name until my voice cracked. I found a trail, half covered already by falling snow, leading into the forest. I followed it for over an hour before it just stopped, like he had vanished mid-step. I should have left then, but my gear was still back at camp. My radio was inside the tent, and I needed to call for help. But when I got back to the village, the tent was ripped apart. Everything was scattered. My equipment was gone, and the singing started again. This time, it was closer. I ran, through the village, past the graves, down the frozen slope to the lake's edge. But the ice there was cracked, water bubbling up through jagged holes that hadn't been there before. Figures moved across the ice, dozens of them, all drifting, all glowing faintly in the twilight. I turned back and ran toward the hills. I don't remember much after that. I must have collapsed in the snow. I remember a voice, soft and distant, whispering in my ear, words I couldn't understand, fingers brushing my face. Then nothing. I woke up in a hospital in Churchill. They said I was found by a search party 3 days after I went missing. I was barefoot, frostbitten, half-conscious, mumbling nonsense. I had deep scratches down my back. My palms were burned. I'd been missing for 6 days. No sign of Utek was ever found. When I tried to tell the authorities what happened, they said I was hallucinating, hypothermia, stress, isolation. But they never explained the symbols burned into my gear, symbols I didn't put there, or how my camera footage was completely wiped, despite having full battery and memory when I left. I tried to go back a year later. The village was gone, not destroyed, not collapsed, just gone. The forest had swallowed it. No cabins, no graves, just trees, thick and silent. No one believes me. I don't blame them. I wouldn't believe me either. But sometimes, when the wind is just right, I still hear it. That song. And it's getting louder. Story 2. The woman who woke up in a parallel life. Spain. I used to believe that reality was something solid, concrete, like the stone walls of the old apartment I grew up in on the outskirts of Zaragoza. But now I'm not sure if I ever really understood what reality was. I've stopped telling people my story. My sister thinks I had a breakdown, and my therapist said the stress of grief can create illusions. But I know what I experienced was real. I lived it, or rather, I am still living it. But it's not the life I remember. It's not the life I lost. It started one morning in late October. The air was cooler than usual, and I remember the way the light spilled through the lace curtains of my bedroom. I had fallen asleep on the couch again, something I did often since Jaime's death. My husband had been gone for nearly 3 years, a car accident. He was driving back from a work trip in Pamplona. They told me he died instantly, closed casket. I never saw the body, only his wedding ring returned in a tiny velvet pouch, handed to me by a woman in uniform who didn't look me in the eyes. I was broken for a long time. I used to lie awake at night, listening for the sound of his key in the lock, the way he used to hum when he cooked, his laugh echoing from the hallway. After a while, I stopped expecting those sounds. I accepted he was gone, or at least I thought I did. That morning, something felt off the second I opened my eyes. The couch was different, smaller, older, covered in a faded red fabric I didn't recognize. The smell in the air was wrong, too. Not the usual mix of lavender and coffee, but something sharper, like citrus and burnt wax. I stood up slowly, my heart already pounding. My apartment looked familiar, but not quite right. The picture frames on the wall were in the wrong order. The rug under my feet had a pattern I didn't remember ever buying. My phone, which I always left on the side table, was missing. And then I heard it. The sound of keys. The door opened, and in walked Jaime, alive, smiling, carrying a bag of churros and whistling like nothing had ever happened. I thought I was hallucinating. I screamed. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, cornered myself like a wounded animal. He dropped the bag and stared at me, frozen. "Clara," he said, his voice shaking. "What's wrong?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just kept staring at him, drinking in every detail. His dark curls, the scar on his chin from when he fell off his bike at 13, the tiny freckle on his left ear. It was him. It was Jaime, alive, breathing. I dropped the knife. I fainted. When I woke up, I was in bed. My bed, but not the one I remembered. This one had a different headboard, carved from wood instead of the metal one Jaime and I had picked out at a flea market in Valencia. He sat beside me, holding my hand. His eyes looked haunted. "You screamed like you didn't know me," he whispered. I didn't know what to say, so I asked the only thing I could. "What year is it?" He looked confused, then told me, 2023. I asked him to tell me what had happened last week, last month, anything. And he did, but none of it matched what I remembered. According to Jaime, we'd never been in an accident. He'd never been to Pamplona for work. We'd spent the past year renovating the kitchen. He even showed me pictures. Us, covered in paint, smiling with sledgehammers in hand. I told him he died in 2020. He laughed at first, thinking I was joking. Then he started crying. That night, he didn't sleep. He stayed up researching fugue states, amnesia, psychological trauma. But none of that mattered. I knew the truth. Something had changed. Over the next few days, more discrepancies surfaced. People I remembered as being alive were suddenly gone. My neighbor Elena, who used to bake me tarta de Santiago every Sunday, had apparently moved to France 2 years ago. My favorite bookstore on Calle Alfonso was now a tourist gift shop. Even my own handwriting had changed slightly, curlier, less structured. My sister Marta visited and noticed nothing. She hugged me like everything was normal. She even scolded me for not answering her messages I had never received. I showed her my journal, the entries about Jaime's death, the grief counseling, the sleepless nights. She looked at me like I'd gone mad. "Clara," she said gently, "Jaime's right. You need help." But I wasn't mad. I wasn't dreaming. Somehow, I had crossed into a different version of my life. I tried to test the boundaries. I drove to the spot where Jaime's accident had supposedly occurred. No cross on the roadside, no scarred tree, nothing. I went to the archives, trying to pull up news articles, obituaries, death certificates. Nothing. It was like that life had never existed. But I remember it. I remember everything. Late one night, I called an old professor of mine, Dr. Alejandro Rivera. He used to lecture on quantum theory and multiverse hypotheses at the University of Zaragoza. I poured everything out. He didn't laugh. He listened. Then, after a long silence, he said, "There are stories like yours, Clara. Not many. People who wake up in worlds just slightly off. Some say it's a neurological glitch. Others think it's something deeper, tears in the fabric of reality. Most don't survive the dissonance." He gave me the name of someone, a woman in Salamanca who had reported something similar. I called, but the number was disconnected. When I asked around, no one seemed to remember her. The more I dug, the more I felt like I was being watched. Lights outside my window at night, shadows in reflections that didn't belong to anyone in the room. Jaime would wake up to me screaming, clawing at invisible walls, begging to be taken back. But to where? To what? One night, I found a letter tucked inside an old book in our attic. I don't remember buying the book. I don't remember ever going up into that attic before. The letter was written in my handwriting, but I didn't write it. It said, "If you're reading this, then the breach has already happened. You crossed over. Don't trust the mirrors. They show the version of you that belongs here, not you. And whatever you do, don't sleep near the window during the full moon. That's when they come." I burned the letter. Since then, I don't sleep during full moons. I cover the mirrors, and every day I pretend to be the Clara that belongs here. The Clara who never lost her husband, who doesn't see strange lights flickering in the corners of rooms, who doesn't hear voices whispering her name from the dark. But I know the truth. I don't belong here. And someday soon, the breach will open again. And I'll be ready. Story 3. The Max Headroom Signal Hijack. Chicago, 1987. I never wanted to talk about what happened in Chicago in '87. Not because I was afraid of people thinking I was crazy, though I knew they would, but because a part of me thought that if I kept quiet, maybe I'd forget it too. But I can't. Not when I still see flashes of static on dark screens. Not when my daughter wakes up screaming from dreams about the flickering man. Not when the hum of dead air still makes my skin crawl. Back in November 1987, I was working the night shift at WTTW, a PBS affiliate in Chicago. I was a tech, real low-tier stuff, mostly just keeping an eye on the broadcast equipment, monitoring tape cues, logging commercials. My name's Ron Calder, and I'd been with the station for a little over 5 years. It was quiet, unglamorous work, the kind of job you only noticed when it went wrong. And on the night of November 22nd, everything went wrong. It was close to 9 p.m., and the Bears game had just wrapped up on Channel 9. I'd been flipping through frequencies, keeping tabs on our relay systems. That's when I saw it, just for a second. A flash of distorted video where the post-game commentary should have been. Static, a whining noise that didn't belong, and then a figure, jerking, twitching on the screen. I blinked, and it was gone. I figured it was just interference. It wasn't unusual for rogue signals to blip in, especially with how janky our equipment was. But then I got a call from a guy I knew over at WGN. He sounded rattled, asking if we'd seen the headroom thing. I didn't know what he meant until about an hour later. That's when the real hijack happened. Lev on our end, at 11:15 p.m., during a rerun of Doctor Who, the screen went black. Then the audio cut, and then there he was, a man in a rubber Max Headroom mask, standing in front of a corrugated metal background that seemed to spin slightly, like it was being held up and waved by someone just off screen. The video was warped, the audio pitched and distorted like it was running through a bad tape deck. He didn't say anything coherent at first, just noises, mocking laughter, gibberish, something about, "My brother is wearing the other glove," and then a high-pitched humming, like he was trying to imitate the Max Headroom character but failed miserably. It wasn't funny, it was grotesque, off-kilter. Then the figure started talking directly to the camera. "You think I'm crazy, but I'm free. I'm inside your head now. We pulled every override we could. Nothing worked. The transmitter wasn't responding to our kill commands. The signal wasn't originating from our studio. It had bypassed it completely. That shouldn't have been possible. You'd need expensive, rare equipment, and you'd have to be physically close to our microwave towers." When it finally cut out, just gone, like someone yanked the plug, I was already calling the FCC and the cops. They didn't seem to grasp how bad it was. To them it was just a prank, an illegal broadcast, not a security breach, not the start of something worse. Because it didn't stop there, not for me. Over the next week, strange things started happening. My TV at home would switch on by itself, always to static. My VCR recorded things I hadn't programmed. Once I rewound a tape of Taxi Driver and saw him, just for a few seconds, standing in the corner of my screen, head tilted, like he was watching me. I thought I was losing it. I got tested for sleep disorders, stress, even early signs of schizophrenia. Nothing. I was fine, except I wasn't. Then the tapes started arriving. The first one came in a plain envelope, no return address, just a VHS tape labeled "Play Me, Ron." I shouldn't have, but I did. The screen was black for the first 10 seconds. Then that humming began again. And there he was, Max Headroom mask, but this time in a dark room lit only by an old desk lamp. He held up a newspaper with the date circled, December 4th, 1987, and whispered, "You'll see." That was 3 days away. I didn't sleep for the next 72 hours. Every noise in my house felt like an intrusion. I kept checking the locks. I covered the TVs with sheets. But when the night of December 4th came, nothing happened. No break-in, no signal, just silence. And then my neighbor disappeared. Her name was Evelyn Bishop, a quiet widow who lived 2 doors down. The cops came the next morning, said her house was unlocked, car still in the driveway, TV still on, tuned to static. There was a pot of water still boiling on the stove, like she'd just walked away mid-step. That's when I knew it wasn't over. I started digging, trying to find anything about the signal. I contacted an old engineering professor I knew, a guy named Paul Renz. He told me the broadcast wasn't just a hijack, it was layered. Multiple analog signals interwoven, like someone had found a way to write data into the noise between frequencies. That's not possible with our tech, he said, unless he was using equipment from the other side. He laughed when he said it, nervously, like it was a joke he hoped I wouldn't understand. I did, because I had started seeing him in reflections, in store windows, bus mirrors, puddles, never directly, always in something glossy or rippling. He never moved, just stared, mask frozen in that demented grin. The worst was the night my daughter, 6 years old at the time, woke up screaming. She said the static man had crawled out of the TV and whispered in her ear, "He's almost done recording." I don't think I've felt true terror until that moment. We left Chicago the next day, packed everything, moved to rural Michigan. No TV, no internet, no radio, just silence. It worked for a while. Then last week I got a USB drive in the mail. No note, no label, just one file, a video. I watched it on a public library computer, just to be safe. It was him again. Same mask, but older now. The room was darker. This time, he said something I haven't been able to shake. "You think changing the channel helps?" I am the channel. Then he leaned forward, real close to the camera, and whispered, "The broadcast never ended." Story 4, The Unsolved Murder of Blair Adams, USA, 1996. I never thought I'd say this, but I believe Blair Adams knew he was going to die. Not in the poetic, life flashing before your eyes kind of way. I mean, really knew, as if something, or someone, told him his time was almost up, and that whatever was chasing him wasn't human. I met Blair once, just once. It was July 1996, and I was working the night shift at a small gas station outside Knoxville, Tennessee, along Interstate 40. You know the kind, half convenience store, half run-down auto shop, surrounded by endless trees and silent highways. A place you'd drive by and forget before the taillights fade in your rear view. But that week, I didn't forget. It started around 2:30 a.m. A silver Toyota Camry pulled in, too fast, tires screeching slightly on the asphalt. I thought it was just another drunk driver, but the guy who stepped out wasn't drunk. He looked terrified. Dirty blonde hair stuck to his forehead with sweat, clothes wrinkled and dusty like he hadn't changed in days, and eyes. His eyes looked like they'd seen something no person should. He walked fast, twitchy, constantly glancing behind him, as if the trees held secrets. I asked him if he needed help. He looked at me like he wasn't sure if I was real. "You ever feel like you're not supposed to be somewhere?" he asked. His voice shook, like the world around you's twisted just enough to feel wrong. I just stared at him. "You all right, sir?" He didn't answer. Instead, he asked if he could use the payphone. I nodded, and he fumbled a few coins, kept dropping them, cursing softly in some accent I couldn't place. Maybe Canadian. He finally made a call. I remember hearing him say something like, "I got away. No, I don't know for how long." And then he said a name I'll never forget. "They followed me here." Whoever was on the other end hung up. He tried calling a few more times, each call growing more frantic, until finally he slammed the phone down and sat on the curb, head in hands, breathing like he'd just run a marathon. I asked him again if he was okay. He just nodded slowly and said, "They're not people. They wear people, but they're not." That's when I started to feel it too. The sense that something else was watching from the edge of the woods. The kind of silence that makes your spine itch, like the night itself is holding its breath. I told him he could rest in the back office if he needed to. He didn't say anything, just nodded again and disappeared behind the shelves. He didn't stay long. 20 minutes later, he was gone. No goodbye, just gone. The next day, I saw him again on the news. His body had been found in a nearby parking lot behind a construction site off Straw Plains Pike. Naked, shoes and pants removed, shirt torn open, his socks were inside out, and scattered around him were thousands of dollars in cash, gold coins, and jewelry, stuff you don't just throw around. But that wasn't the worst part. There was no cause of death. The medical examiner couldn't find any stab wounds, no gunshots, no blunt force trauma. It's like his body just gave out. They said his stomach was riddled with ulcers, and that his organs were inflamed, signs of extreme stress. He'd literally died of terror. They called it a bizarre, unsolved case. I called it something else. See, after Blair's death, I started piecing things together. He was Canadian, left his job and his family up in British Columbia without warning. Tried to cross the US border but was stopped. Went back, emptied his bank account, withdrew everything he owned in gold and cash. Told his mother someone was trying to kill him. When police searched his home, they found half-packed bags, an open passport, and torn-up photographs, like he couldn't decide where to go, or was too scared to commit. Then he made it across the border, flew to Washington, then Knoxville, for no reason anyone could figure out. Rented the Camry, was seen at hotels, gas stations, always pacing, always looking over his shoulder. One motel clerk said he came into the lobby 5 times in one night, walked around, then left again. No room, no explanation. The construction site where he died. No one knew why he was there. It was gated off, miles from anywhere he might have had business. No known enemies, no drug use, no mental illness history. Just a man who said he was being hunted, and then was found dead under circumstances that made no sense. I would have left it at that. Just another creepy, unsolved case. But about 2 weeks later, something happened that convinced me Blair Adams was telling the truth. I was locking up the gas station. Same shift, around the same time, 2:30, maybe 3 a.m., when the phone rang. We didn't get calls at night. Almost never. I picked it up, expecting it to be a prank or a wrong number. All I heard was breathing. Then, in a low, broken voice, like it was crackling through static, I heard, "He warned you. You listened." I hung up immediately, thought it was my mind playing tricks. But that night, the power flickered. All the lights in the back office went out. For a moment I saw something, reflected in the black glass of the freezer door, a figure, pale, too tall, no facial features, just the outline of something wearing a human shape, like clothes stretched over a mannequin. I didn't sleep for days. I started researching. I found old stories, legends really, told by indigenous people in Canada. Stories of skinwalkers, not the ones Hollywood sells you. These were older, more terrifying. Beings that mimicked humans perfectly, but didn't feel human. Beings that could latch onto you, follow you across borders, through cities, through phone lines, through dreams. Beings that don't kill you with claws or bullets. They drain your will, your spirit. They whisper fear into you until your body gives out. I'm not saying that's what killed Blair Adams, but I'm saying I believe him. A few months after his death, a stranger came into the station. Older man, wore a long coat, eyes too dark to be normal. He asked if I'd heard of the Adams case. I told him I had. He stared at me for a long time, like he was deciding something. Then he said, "You were lucky he stopped here first." Gave them a scent stronger than yours. I asked him what he meant. He didn't answer, just walked out into the fog and never came back. It's been almost 30 years. I still dream of Blair sometimes, always standing in that gas station parking lot, staring into the trees, whispering something I can't quite hear. And every now and then, when I turn on the static of an old TV, or when the store radio crackles for no reason, I swear I hear that voice again. "You listened."